We're here to talk about building the national startup or stroke innovation ecosystem. And sometimes people keep hearing me talk about government. And then they have another favorite word, which I think I had with Victor earlier today when he was talking about triple helix. And people wonder, why do I use those words so much? It's because I am a big I really just love the whole aspect of innovation and knowledge and how we create market value from knowledge. But when it comes to government, who is government? And what is the role of government? I was put on the spot and I had to explain what is the brief for ESOs. So today, at least I have two people from government. So I want to start by just putting you a little bit on the spot. What is the role of government within all of this startup industry ecosystem, innovation ecosystem, and then I'll get to Mary in a bit.
Okay, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Dr. Karanja.
And before we go too far, please introduce yourself. And I just gave your title. And I know we've worked for many, many years from when I was in academia, so please just tell us a little bit about yourself.
Okay, thank you. So I'm Stephen Odua, currently the Director of Industries in charge of private sector development and business environment. I am also the project coordinator of the Kenya Industry and Entrepreneurship Project. I'm sure some of you have heard about that. I have over 30 years working experience. I studied statistics and computer science for my bachelor's degree. And then I took entrepreneurship for my master's degree. And with my 30 years in government, we have had so much training at various levels. Actually, I started as a computer programmer. I'm now involved in investment promotion, enterprise development, business environment improvement, and specifically like now, how can we support private sector development? So that's basically what I do on a day-to-day basis. I have also sat in a few boards. Currently, I'm an alternate director in the Kenya Investment Authority, which deals about promoting, for your information, both the local and foreign investors. I've also sat in many other boards. And indeed, I believe I have also had some training on how you could train as a trainer of trainers under the ILO training of start and grow your business. So I think I know a bit about what it is to support entrepreneurs and look forward to engaging with you this afternoon to learn more about it. Thank you.
Thank you. If you don't have his number, talk to me nicely. I'll charge. But what I can say about Steve is that I've known him when I joined public sector, my first job at Cambridge, I met this gentleman. He never looked down on me, no matter how young I was and the stupid questions I was asking. And he's been that way the entire time I've always known him. And I can tell he's very competent. So thank you again for always being there, usual suspects. And now tell us a little bit about the government and yes, the tough questions.
Thank you.
Yes.
First and foremost, we are all government. Let me start from there. At times we say that us as public servants are the government, but you yourselves are not government. No, government encompasses all of us, both because you are a taxpayer. Your role as a taxpayer, now let's talk about the ecosystem, is to employ me as a government employee. And what is our role? Our role is, one, to create an conducive business environment. For you to be able to thrive as a private sector, you need fair competition. Like now, there's a lot of talk about maybe the foreign founders having an advantage than the local founders. How can we create that business environment? That is the role of government. Number two, we may need regulation. For you as a tech person who is coming up with financial solutions, you need protection when somebody disappears with your money. So how can you be supported? We provide regulation. So the other role of government is providing regulation, creating that business environment, and basically just supporting the country to ensure that we are able to grow together through economic development. so that we create the regulations, the policies that will support that growth together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now with Florence, how are you doing?
Very well.
You still refused my lunch, lakini asante sana for coming.
No, I couldn't eat twice. But thank you so much.
Yes, so you used to be also in the Ministry of Industrialization, then you moved to ESC. And I think, first of all, somewhere in the history of ASSEK, you played a very, very important role. If you can just, first, once you introduce yourself, tell us about this special role you played in the creation of ASSEK. And don't give us feedback of how we are doing, because I know you can.
Yeah, you're doing well.
But just quickly about yourself and how the role you played for ASSEK, first of all.
Thank you very much, Dr. Karanja. It's really a pleasure to be here today. I can't believe we're talking about an organization that a couple of years ago was just a concept. So I'm first of all really proud of where you are at now. So my name is Florence Kimata. I'm not sure why Dr. Karanja is not able to say what I do, but I'll tell you what I do. So I joined government about 6 years ago in an advisory role as an SME advisor in the Ministry of Industry, which I played for a period of 3 years, and then I moved on from the Ministry of Industry to the Ministry of East African Community in a department that had been newly established called the Department of Business Reforms and Transformation. Now, within the Ministry of Industry, I was really advising on policies for enterprise development. In my current role, I'm advising, or rather we are instituting reforms on public service delivery that enable a conducive environment for businesses and particularly SMEs. So I'm on the flip side. So you can help nurture and establish very good, sustainable businesses, but if they are not in a thriving environment, I think we won't be making much progress. So it's really a privilege for me to be able to, to lend to both worlds. So to differentiate my role and really what my colleague Stephen does, he's really on the private sector development, enterprise development side, but I am on the enabling environment side, where we look at how do we deliver services to these businesses. What do we need to reform in terms of even digitizing processes, in terms of amending laws that make it more difficult or more costly for businesses to thrive? And really, how do we then inculcate a culture of service, service to businesses and service to make our country a competitive destination in terms of attracting investments. So that's what I currently do in government. I have a background in banking and investment banking, as well as development finance. Before I joined government, and I'm really in government in the capacity of an IFC consultant. I'm seconded to government by the International Finance Corporation. But before that, I was in commercial banking initially, and then in investment banking, again looking for financing solutions for SMEs and how we can scale up that. And what I did was to look at instruments that build more access to capital and lending lines of credits to commercial banks that would eventually go to SMEs, and also investing in private equity funds that also invest in SMEs. So that's what I did before I joined the public policy advisory role that I am in now.
Thank you. There are people who actually believe that the government does not understand us. And that's why I'm really glad that you're talking about what you are, what you've done, your expertise. Because sometimes we take a very unnecessary us versus them. And you are very right saying, hey, who is government again? Yeah. We are very quick at putting up interesting barriers and trying to imagine that over that fence, they don't have our best interests, or they don't understand. So that sense of and I think we are at an interesting part of our journey as an ecosystem, where sometimes I feel, you're almost like a teenager. You're stretching, and you can feel, yes, I have the strength, but do you have the experience? Do you have are you mature both also mentally and experience-wise beyond just being able to kick and, So it takes that very nuanced approach that I can hear from both of your career progressions to be able to support an ecosystem like this. So I'll come back to you still. I have one big question on KIEP because you talked about it. And then I know you've done a lot of work on ease of doing business, and I got a very interesting insight on that not too long ago in Naivasha. And there's a lot that in what you said that you need to unpack because it's English. But how do we really get to understand what does this mean for me as a founder? What does this mean for me as a hub in terms of when you're talking of the services that the government is providing?
And I forgot to mention about my role in ASSEK.
Sorry? Oh yes, and your role in ASSEK. Thank you for remembering that. How did that happen?
So I think it was around 2017, if I'm not wrong, when we started conversations. 2017, right? Yeah, these were my friends.
Yes.
Yeah, so we started conversations. What would happen is that we would convene conversations on, how can we help, with the challenges that startups are facing, that SMEs are facing. The language that was familiar in the ministry are SMEs. So startups was not a conversation that was very familiar in the ministry, and we thought we need to start having that conversation about how we then support innovation, how we support startups, and what's the policy around that. And then I started engaging with the various hubs, and they would come in individually, sometimes in groups, and we started having those conversations also facilitated by the Nairobi Innovation Week platform. And then we said, okay, how do we structure a proper engagement with government? And that is where the idea of can we form an association? And I remember sitting in the room in a meeting we hosted in the ministry, and I think it was David of Sote Hub who told me there is already an association, but I think it was a name that was registered and it was on the website, and when we Googled it was just a name, there was no association. And then we started the process of how do we then form an association, and of course the hubs took the lead in that, and we facilitated in any way we could in terms of holding the necessary engagements and being there up to the formation and the launch. And I'm just happy to see that you have done so well, and even the conversations. I got to listen into some of the conversations in the morning. I got to listen to part of the startup bill and also a little about the mapping by Brighter Bridges. And I mean, it's just really impressive to see how the map and the footprints have grown. And now lending to these conversations on the role of ESOs, I think the flow fits very well, and I hope we'll be able to add some value.
Thank you so much. Please mark off it, Avadali. Now, I didn't want to use her nickname, which is Mama ASSEK, but you can hear where we literally born in a boardroom in government, within the Ministry of Industrialization at the time.
Yeah.
So, and here we are. So, the key thing I wanted to highlight is that we are not orphans. Tuko na nyumbani. You get it? Thank you. So let's move on to Mary Mwangi, another dear friend. You first introduce yourself, then I'll speak and say how I know you.
Okay. So I'm Mary Mwangi, as you've heard. I am a program manager with the Argirias Foundation. I'll start with myself, then I will talk about Argirias. Is that what you intended? Sure. Okay. My background is in this sector, surprisingly. So I have a background in communication and political science academically. That was from the University of Nairobi. Then I moved on to USIU because my interest was really in, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family, and I wanted to see how I can improve the business environment for businesses in this country. And I did not have a business degree. So I did my MBA at USIU, and then later on I discovered that businesses do not operate in a vacuum, and government has to be like the largest stakeholder when it comes to business in a country like this. So, and I had no understanding of how government actually operates, and I moved on to Strathmore, where I did my master's in public policy and management. So academically, that's my background. In the past, I have worked with a couple of associations. So one being the Africa Venture Capital and Private Equity Association. So I worked with them for a couple of years, and I also worked with the ASPE Network of Development Entrepreneurs, which is actually not a network of development entrepreneurs, but a network of organizations that support organizations that support development entrepreneurs. So I was with them for close to 6 years before I moved on to Argidius. Prior to that, I have done a few stints in a number of businesses, starting with at home, and throughout the years I've done a few stints in a couple of small businesses and in consulting as well.
Thank you. And one of the things about Kenya that I think people don't usually appreciate about this country is the depth of talent. And because when I was moving from my initial career as a scientist in Cambridge to start talking Vilgru and start incubation, I didn't have a clue to half of the language that we're talking about today. All this was crazy jargon. And one of the people who were able to hold my hand and kind of take me through a very steep learning curve was Mary at Andy. And Andy has done a lot in this ecosystem. And it shocks me that it's not well known. So I want you to first talk a little bit about Andy, just unpack a little bit of what do you mean when you talk of supporting development entrepreneurs. Who are these people? How have you been supporting them? And how has that contributed to the startup ecosystem that we see today?
Great. So Andy is actually a program of the Aspen Institute, which is a think tank that's based in the US. And the network was begun by a group of organizations that were involved in supporting small businesses in emerging markets. So either development finance institutions, there were a number of private equity funds there as well, some VC players as well, and a good number of capacity development providers or ESOs. And the reason for bringing this group together was that there was a tendency to operate in silos. So we are all trying to support small and growing businesses. That's a subset of SMEs that Andy is really interested in. So it's businesses that are on that growth path, have 5 to 250 employees and are looking for growth capital of between $20,000 and $2 million. So those types of businesses are receiving all kinds of support from people who are not necessarily talking to each other. So Andy became what I would call a community of practice for organizations that are involved in supporting SMEs in some shape or form. The work that I did at Andy was in the East Africa chapter. There was a lot of interest in East Africa at the time, so you've had, Kenya being called the Silicon Savannah, and there's a lot of interest in this region when it comes to developing SMEs and the role that SMEs can play in development. But there's also a lot of information gaps. As Robert is talking about, we speak a different language, and it also took me a while to become fluent in this language that we use. And funny thing is, we could be sitting in a room with a banker talking about debt, and we are not using the same words. That makes no sense. And language has a way of really, it can bring people together, but it has a way of really isolating people and creating these small silos and things like that. So Andy was kind of an attempt to localize this network of organizations that's supporting small businesses in this market. I remember my very first chapter meeting in East Africa. There were exactly 3 Africans in the room. So there was myself, my former boss at AFCA, who had joined the network just to support me, I guess, and he'd brought 2 of his staff members. Everybody else was European or American or basically an expert. And by the time I was leaving, and even now, you will find that that's not the case. So we've had a lot of local voices included as well, and now they actually want to do a lot more around advocacy and engaging with government. So let me stop there for Andy.
Thank you. And I think it's good to check out Andy because it's a powerhouse in terms of understanding at the global level what's happening. We picked up a lot of language, impact investment. I was surprised to discover that even the very early experiments that led to this movement of impact investment, East Africa contributed quite a bit to that. And it was through structures like Andy that are not even registered organizations, but being able to say, as practitioners, what do you want to see? And there's lots that we should be able to tap into. Now, you're now with Argidius, and you talked about Argidius very briefly. I just want you to talk a little bit about Argidius. And the reason that especially I wanted you to be part of this conversation is because this thing that I saw in Andy, that Argidius was also funding, which was GALI, the Global Acceleration Learning Initiative. What was that? Why were you doing it? And what are you now doing? Because I think Gali did come to an end. So for us who are ESO builders, we are running ESOs. What is this language? We've talked of this, this crazy language. Can you demystify it a little bit?
Sure, I will try. I'm not sure I can demystify all of it, but I will certainly try. So the Argidius Foundation is part of a family's philanthropy, a European family's philanthropy. And our theory of change is that the best way to lift communities out of poverty is by improving incomes. And SMEs are engines for job creation. And there's a lot of research that points to the best way to lift somebody out of poverty is to give them access to a formal job. So formal jobs are the best indicator of somebody who is out of poverty. And the way we support the SME ecosystem is by supporting the business development services that are available to SMEs. So when my current director got into the job, that was about 8 years ago. So he was presented with this strategy that said, okay, now we are only going to invest in accelerators. That's what we're going to do because they're the most effective. Let's do that. And accelerators that focus on ventures. So we had a conversation, someone asked a question about what startup actually means. That's part of the problem. Like everyone defines these things. There's no uniform definition. And definitions
Did I make it worse?
No, you actually, I think your definition was actually pretty accurate. But there are all these different ways of talking about the same thing. But definitions actually matter. So to get to a point where we can actually agree on this is what this means is a huge step in the right direction, and hopefully we'll touch on that a little bit later. So anyway, so I was presented with this strategy, so accelerators that are supporting ventures, and ventures are ideally startups. So it's businesses that are designed to scale, and they're typically designed to scale very fast through venture capital, exactly what you said. And they're designed to grow very big, very fast, and typically that, the reason why they can scale very big, very fast is through technology. So, but he said, how do we know? So, because there was no real evidence behind this idea that the best investment to create jobs in emerging markets is supporting really high growth ventures. So he decided we're going to embark on a learning journey. So let us support a number of ESOs that are supporting different types of businesses. Let us try and figure out what effectiveness actually looks like. And the best way to do that was to try and identify, like, how will we know if these services are working, if this BDS is actually delivering results, is by trying to identify, like, proxies for... Sorry,
you just mentioned another jargon,
okay.
BDS.
BDS, sorry, so business development services.
Thank you.
So looking at different forms of business development services, targeting different types of SMEs, so the ones that are high growth, tech-enabled ventures, the ones that look like the businesses, which I did not see represented in this sector or in support for this sector, which are the kinds of businesses all my aunties and uncles are in. So it's typical family businesses, brick and mortar, grow slowly, have been around for 10, 20 years, and the children will inherit that business. Traditional business models, and also looking at not micro livelihoods, but the micro enterprises that are on that growth path. So look at different types of interventions and then track the performance of the businesses that are supported by these interventions to see what effectiveness actually looks like, to see which ones deliver that revenue growth and those jobs that we are looking for. And with accelerators, there was also a need to see what does effective acceleration actually look like. So that's what the Global Accelerator Learning Initiative was, which was an initiative Argidia supported. It was run by Andy and I forget the name of this one. It's Duke.
Emory.
It's Emory University. I forget the name of the business school. It has a name that starts with a G that's difficult to pronounce. So anyway, so they were the researchers, and Andy was helping to manage this, and they tracked the performance of a number of accelerators over a number of years. So the things that they measured were for each accelerator, the businesses that went through that accelerator, they would track the revenue for that business, and revenue is a good proxy for growth. So profit is sometimes difficult to determine, and it looks different in different sectors. But if you ask an entrepreneur how much they are making, they can easily arrive at that. So revenue is easy to arrive at and is a good proxy for growth. They tracked jobs created, and then they also tracked access to follow-on funding. So are these businesses able, after they've gone through these accelerators, able to attract investment, whether that's debt from a bank or from one of these other players, or equity or grants, or are they able to attract finance? So they tracked that over a number of years, and they were able to come up with certain observations of what effective acceleration looks like. And this data is, the data set is available. If you're a researcher and you want to geek out on the data, that's available. And the reports are also publicly available, and we will share those.
Thank you. And I think just to kind of highlight why this is really important for me, it's because we're saying we have to see how do we harness, how do we achieve development through the startup ecosystem. So to me, the question of how do we perform as a hub, how can we measure performance? Are we effective or not? What works? What do we have empirical evidence that it actually works and has worked in? Because Gali was actually global. We were getting data from East Africa, Latin America, Asia, America itself. And so we actually have as close as you can get to a randomized controlled trial. In fact, I think there was a part of it that had an RCT element to it. But to me, we don't need to reinvent the wheel, is all I need to say. So if you are here and you are setting up a hub, you are managing a hub, you run a hub, we have the, what do I call it, the cheat code of how to be effective as an ESO like that. Mwakenya Apple. Is that right?
Yes, so there's the Gali Mwakenya and there's the Argidius Mwakenya as well, which also gets into the, it also encompasses some of the Gali findings.
Yes.
So as Gali was doing that for accelerators, we were also continuing to collect data because we don't only fund accelerators, we fund other forms of business development services. So there are consulting firms, mentorship programs, coaching, programs that are focused on access to finance, programs that are focused on management training. So we tracked those same data points consistently over 7 years from all our partners. And then for each business, we would have data of about 3 years. So it's first year baseline and then 2 years post-program. And we have also identified like what are some of the qualities of effective business development services. So we identified selection, we identified programs that charge tend to be more effective, or people who charge for the services.
Hold on, stop, sorry. This is big news. So you're saying we become more effective if we charge for our services versus if we are feeling wishy and supporting an entrepreneur for free?
Because when you charge for business development services, you change the nature of the relationship. So it changes from a relationship that is where you're looking at the SME as a beneficiary to looking at the SME as a client. So it becomes a value-based relationship. And we have found that when people charge, it's not even about how much you're charging, it's about creating that value-based relationship. So BDS is not positioned as charity. And being in Africa and with all the NGOs that have been running around trying to do good things, one of the negative externalities of having a lot of development money flowing in this continent is this creating that beneficiary relationship even with businesses, which does not translate into effective BDS. So charging helps with selection because people get to choose with their money. When you charge them, they actually demand more and you get better feedback. It's, you give me this water for free, I'm not going to complain. Like, I'll drink it, I'll be very happy with it. But if you tell me to pay 100 shillings, I'll be like, wait, it needs to come in a glass, it needs to be chilled. No, like I need better. Yeah. So it actually changes the quality of the feedback you get. And other than just charging, there's also addressing, when you focus on addressing problems. So a lot of BDS tends to be focused on help downloading to the entrepreneur. These are the 30 things you need to know to run your business, which is good. So they need to know how to manage finances, people, they need to know all of these things. But that's not necessarily how adults learn. So adults learn by solving problems. If you focus on the problems that the entrepreneur is having at that particular point, first you build trust, you create engagement, and then you actually help them to start to see the effectiveness of those services immediately. As opposed to, I learned cash flow management 2 years ago, but I didn't have a cash flow management problem then, and now is when I have it and I can't even remember what I learned then. So I was happy with what I learned, but it didn't really help me. So I was satisfied, but it wasn't effective. And there's a difference between satisfaction is not a proxy for effectiveness. Someone could be very satisfied with your services as an ESO, but that doesn't mean that your service is necessarily effective. So there was that, focus on learning, so making sure you're collecting data and obviously leading by example, making sure that you yourself as an ESO are doing all the things that you're asking the SMEs to do.
Wow. So thank you. And please, please let's clap. I think if we don't understand the value of this, we should not be seated here. Because we are saying, how do we transform this country through startup ecosystem? The people to do it. Earlier you heard me saying the ESO, the hub, ndio baba na mama. And I think that playbook of how to be the tough love and the kindness, the soft side also, how do you get it right? We don't need to really reinvent the wheel, and that means massive. Because it means that we can scale, we can replicate what we've been talking about in Silicon Valley and other parts of the world, the startup Chile, the other countries, Israel, by having a playbook that allows us to just hit the play button, implement it, customize it for us, and we start scaling. An amazing tool to have in our toolbox. I'm coming now back to government, and hey, now, let me not come to you first. You used some other big words there that I was like, the English, that's not English. In fact, if you had not said you're a finance person, I would have said you're a lawyer. You're saying, how do you work to create, how does the government serve businesses? And how specifically, even when you are looking at the setting up of ASSEK, were you envisioning the government supporting the hubs? And is that happening?
Okay. So I'll first start with a disclaimer from my colleague Stephen that we are all government, which is very true because coming from private sector side and I went and sat in government and I used to wonder who will solve problems. I go to the PS, to the CS, I download all the problem and they tell me your solution is a policy, so we need to work. So like, there was nobody, I couldn't find that government I was looking for to address. So we are all government. We all have a personal responsibility. So as we formed ASSEK, and really I was looking at how government engages and how effective we need to be in properly engaging government, I looked at structures that work like KEPSA. So KEPSA has a framework, and just because of the way they're structured, they're really able to engage government on behalf of private sector. And what I saw in the formation of ASSEK is this, critical mass of ESOs that are there to really support businesses, but really need the visibility and support even from the policy side. So I thought that this is the role that ASSEK should play in terms of being that ecosystem catalyst, and then coming up to support startups. So I think the structures are now forming. The partnerships are beginning to come on board. Steve will talk more about that and how, on the side of the Ministry of Industry, they're working with ASSEK. But maybe I talk a little bit more about, what we do on the enabling environment side. Because initially, the work that we do was formed out of the Ease of Doing program supported by the World Bank. But over the years, of course, government appreciated the need to reform public service to be able to support government more efficiently, and they institutionalize the agenda. So as a department was created, it was not to satisfy the World Bank objectives and so on. It was more to start taking some individual responsibility as a country and saying, if we reform how we deliver services, we are adding to our bottom line. We are creating businesses that effectively contribute to the economy. And we all keep on saying that, SMEs or entrepreneurs are the engine to, economic development. We really need to put, our money where our mouth is. So in doing that, that department now focuses fully on how, from the time a business is started, so from registering your business to the time you exit your business, either through the capital markets or if it becomes insolvent, how do we facilitate that process? So we look at, for example, I'll just take a few examples of the different stages in the life cycle of a business. When you're registering a company.
And as you're doing that, because one of the things that, and why I really wanted you to be here, and thanks for being here, is because I was asking myself, once I started learning all the stuff that you're doing, I was curious about the uptake of all of these services. Okay. And for us as the hubs, the question I started asking myself is, if we don't know about this, it means even the startups that we're supporting don't know. Those founders also don't know. So please just shamelessly plug for every opportunity that we have for plugging in to what you're already rolling out.
Okay. If we start from registering a company, we looked at the process of, we mapped the process of registering a company where you are required to submit documents to the company registry, to submit documents to KRA, to submit documents probably to the National Social Security Fund or to NHIF if you have employees, and all that information you're submitting is the same information to government agencies. So we started querying the process and saying, why should you make an entrepreneur spend so much time and money, and stages of engaging different bodies in government to give the same information? Why can't we create a platform where you submit to one agency in government, they have a system in the back end where they share this information. And then we started reforming and automating the system. And we said, what is the point of application? The point of application is through the business registration services. If you submit your application, business registration services should be able to share your data with KRA, with NSSF, with NHIF, and you don't need all those points of entry. Then you can manage the cost of starting a business, which is now very clearly stated as $10,650 to incorporate your company. And then we made it easy also to incorporate a one-man company where most of us, when we started a business, we had to call your sister or your mom to be the next director so that we can then have a 2- or 3-man director to start a business. Now you can have a one-person director. So the process now—
That's a limited liability company.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's more like formalizing a sole proprietorship. So you submit all your application documents to BRS, and within our target is 24 hours if there are no errors in the system and if you fully submitted the documents requested for. And within 24 hours, you get your certificate of incorporation, your PIN, your NSSF, your NHIF. That's the process now. So that effectively reduces the time an entrepreneur would take in complying, because this is about complying, that for us is very important in terms of the uptick. And what we have seen in, for example, during the COVID period, the number of companies registered shot up, to even 20% of the previous year.
Wow.
So we were very happy that there was this now digital platform where they could register companies, because if I'm sitting at home and I realize, okay, I probably have lost my job, but I can do something, I have the tools, I have my mind, I have my talents, I have the skills to be able to start something that will, solve a problem. And we have seen the uptick of that. And then, so other indicators we look at are how do you then trade, for example, across borders? Let's reform the systems of trading across borders. What is the process of, let's say, importing products and exporting products? So we look at, is it digitized? And then we look at the kind of documents they ask for and the kind of agencies that you're going to interact with. So we've substantially reduced the documents they require for you to export anything. We have then, incorporated a lot of the agencies within Kentrade, and also reduce the cost of imports and exports. So a lot of the fees that you were previously charged, you will see the decrease in the number of, in the amount of licenses that the cost of the licenses that were out there. When you look at, applying for a development, a construction permit within county government, we looked at the process again, mapped it, and then even looked at the cost. We said once you apply, you have to engage with Nairobi Water, you have to engage with NEMA, you have to engage with the National Construction Authority. How can we reduce the time taken for you to get a development? When I go to the city council and say I want to construct my house, and another person goes and says, I want to construct a hotel. Why should it take the same time to construct a house, to get an approval for constructing a house and constructing a hotel? So we implemented a risk-based criteria, and we told them best practice is that you separate the risk profiles of these developments. And we started with Nairobi County. So Nairobi County, for what we call low risk, which is like a single dwelling house or a renovation and so on, within 5 days, they have meetings. Before, they had monthly meetings to approve all applications that have come in the month. So now every week they sit and apply and approve those low-risk ones. And then it goes to the next agency. And what we have done is to automate a lot of this, the application process. So if you're applying for water, you don't need to go to Nairobi Water. Go onto their online platform, apply for water. You will be guided. They'll even tell you the cost of, the material you need to get your piping to the source. They have now incorporated a GIS system, geographical index system, where they map their whole network. So if you use the GPS and identify your coordinates, they'll tell you how far you are from the source. And they can then cost for you what it will take you. So going through these agencies and automating their processes. And then we also help them to amend their laws. So if we look at the National Construction Authority, who is supposed to be looking at the quality standards of buildings, and every day we are seeing buildings collapsing in town, then we needed to give them some teeth to bite. So we amended their law to make it, to include a mandate for inspection. So they have to inspect when you're constructing. Secondly, we amended their law to incorporate the building code, which is going to be launched soon. So we went through a process of doing a building code for the industry, because as much as you're telling people to build quality houses, what's the criteria? You have not given them a guide, So, just reforming those systems. And then again, within judiciary, how do you help small businesses in enforcing contracts? So imagine a startup, you're getting into a contractual agreement with an investor. How do we manage that whole enforcing contracts, How do we make sure that if things go wrong, they'll be resolved pretty quickly? So we formed the small claims court within the commercial division that is supposed to accelerate cases of, like what we call small claims court deals with cases that are a value of 1 million and below. So for those cases, you do e-filing. Filing fees are exempted. And then you are also taken through a fast-track process in resolving your cases. You can be referred to the alternative dispute resolution mechanism, where you're told, okay, mediation will work for you. And then we also put a cap as to the number of adjournments you can have in such cases to 3, and a limit of 60 days.
Wow.
So these are for a lot of SMEs get stuck when they get into a problem, a contractual problem. So how do we help them resolve those cases? And many more. I mean, I could talk about many more, but what I could say is that for these reforms, we launched a milestone report last year in November. And this year, during the State of Nation address, we'll launch what we have done in the last 1 year. And that report can be found on our website, in the Ministry of East African Community and Regional Development website. And it can also be found in the regulatory toolkit, which I guess I'll talk, if we have time, we'll talk more about.
I think what we need to do, because you can hear the amount of stuff that's happening beneath the surface. And I was saying to myself, yes, thank you. We do need to acknowledge that, because it's not, we didn't go on strike. We didn't say bado mapambano and go and camp at the offices. Somebody said we're going to do this because we believe it's right. And that's amazing. So we do have a government that is actually looking out for us. And I think what would probably be helpful, because as you are saying, I'm thinking to myself, where do I get this information? Yeah. We do actually have a regular, a monthly newsletter that we do every month. And I feel we should probably just do a feature on all of these amazing, you call them reforms, that's happening, because it's kind of like it's not getting out there. And even as you were talking, I kept asking myself, now I get it, when, especially all that construction stuff and the fact that affordable housing is one of the big 4 agenda, I can now start to see how the whole architecture is coming together from a development perspective and creating an enabling environment for us founders, hubs, to say, how do we invest in this space? So thank you. Makofi tena. Now, I would be killed by these people if we were to leave this room without touching a very interesting story called Kiep. Because we were told, we were told by Mama ASSEK, she said, you guys need to organize yourselves. You need to, that's what gives you a place at the table. Natuka, we tried. In fact, I got a suit. Where's my jacket? I got a suit and I was like, now I've been waiting for this invitation to come to this table to understand how KIEP comes to fund the startups, comes to fund the ESOs, because we really are out there making magic happen through, I don't know what. So that's why, in fact, I think we started with the word of prayer, didn't we? Because we live by faith, not by sight. But as the story has been coming, this story has been getting better and better. So as we are like, now wait for the best one. Where are we with KIEP?
Okay. Thank you very much. I think you've actually asked two questions in one, but I'll take both of them.
Yes.
Yeah, to begin with, I want to also just remind us that when we started the reforms issues, I've been working very closely with Florence here in doing this reform. And I want to bring it even closer to us today. As I was coming, of course, being in the office there, we have parking. I was asking myself, I parked out there. Where are these guys in yellow? Do you know them? The Kanjo, eh? Where are these guys in yellow? Then my mind clicked, thanks to the reforms, that these days what you need to do is you pay online. So I was like, where's these guys? Do I go and ask the watchmen down there that these guys are around? Now imagine I've come like I came right on time. I am late for the session. You still have to look for the Kanjo person to give you a receipt. Look at what cost it will give to us. Yeah. Secondly, to the county government, I will give him 50 bob. See, Sanane, give him 50 bob. I'll not be paying the right price. Then the third part of it is like, how sure am I that, it's the payment has actually been made? These days, they even give you a text to remind you what? Ujalipa. Yeah, and we are going to load even the paying charges. What's all that? Reforms. And it's coming closer right into ourselves today. I got that nostalgic experience when I thought about, those good old days. Because normally I would park in the office and we are in the parking, I'd go out, I'd get a car probably. But today I drove down, so that's how that experience came in. But that just shows or reminds us of the power of reform, of the power of what is changing in the world. I'll go to the question that Beatrice asked. In government, we believe that as you start an enterprise, you're a startup, yeah? And this startup would want 1, issues of registration, 2, issues of standard, 3, issues of finance. So as a ministry, we are working on the reforms to deal with the issue of registration, which is done from a different ministry. We have development financial institutions. In this case, we have ICDC, we have Industrial, Commercial and Development Corporation. Let me break down our jargon. We have the Kenya Industrial Estate. So Industrial, Commercial and Development Corporation, actually, to your point, provide venture capital. So that you are saying that they are the arm of government that supports institutions, that actually supports IP, intellectual property. By the way, we have come a long way. Through the new constitution is when we have actually recognized intellectual property as a property. It was never there in our previous constitution. And what do we have as innovation entrepreneurs? What is the biggest asset we have? The idea, the intellectual property. So we have already come. It's a long journey. We have now had that in our constitution. Then we started asking ourselves in the ministry, and thanks to that question was being asked. So what is this innovative startup? Because you agree that startup is an SME that is just starting up. It will require finance. We have the Kenya Bureau of Standards to help you in standardization. We have the Kenya Industrial Research Development Institution to help you in transfer of technology. We have the Kenya Industrial Property Institute to register your patent. But then these innovative startups, the startups that ANDE is supporting, were not fitting into that box. So we told ourselves as a ministry, as part of the reform issues, and the time the KIEP was being developed, the design stage, is when we are also with Florence as we are doing those reforms. We said, what is it then as government we can look at and support this part of the ecosystem that is actually not being supported? Because when you go to KEPSA, that we work with very closely, you go to Kenya Association of Manufacturers, they really don't understand what we in ASSEK as innovative startups are doing. So we decided to create that niche, and as Florence has said, and thanks to the proposal at that time, was let's also have you as an association to be started as a standalone, so that we can, because as government, it's very difficult for us to deal with individuals. It will take us forever. But if you are grouped together as an association, it's very easy now to understand the issues that come in, and you also get feedback from us. And as we develop the policy, it becomes much easier, quicker, and you get consensus faster if you are in an association. And that has been grown now into associations of matatus, cooperatives, professional institutions, association of engineers. It's breaking down all across into various sectors. So when that thing came up, we decided as a ministry, why don't we come up with a project that, one, will understand that particular aspect of innovative startups, the ones that are mainly tech-oriented. Of course, there is still a debate on, and that's where the startup bill came in, and I'm sure we discussed that earlier. How do you define a startup, an innovative startup? But for us, our simple definition, again to your point, what is that now ecosystem? So when you look at that ecosystem, the first thing that came into our mind is we already have the Andes in the environment. How do we support them? Yeah, and like as you had also mentioned earlier, Daktari, you'll find that a lot of these are donor dependent. How can we make them sustainable? Yeah, so we said, how can we support the incubators? So that is where we started with. Then there's a new terminology, again, Mary mentioned, accelerators. What's an accelerator? In government, we are used to incubation. We are not used to acceleration. So how can we support the accelerators? We are calling those now intermediaries to the innovative startups. Then we ask ourselves, there are people called innovation hubs. The likes of Odeda there in Lake Hub. Yeah. How can we support them also? Because they are actually supporting the innovative startups as intermediaries. Then we looked at ourselves and said, we have people who are training the innovators, the bootcamp providers. And now bootcamp training is a new, again, better.
Now we're doing master classes.
Is how can we then, because they have a role, they're actually doing skills training at a very short time. Yeah, you as a startup, you don't have time to go to class, but you need the skills. How can you then be given the skills, and the bootcamps then help to bridge that gap? So those are the intermediaries we look at within our ecosystem. Then the startups themselves. Then we are looking at, we have innovators in the universities. So the university also becomes part of that ecosystem. And we have the corporate world, who have challenges in terms of challenges that they need solutions with, which the startups can give, but they don't have a linkage. So we started by saying, first, can we support that innovation ecosystem intermediaries? Can we strengthen it? Enable them to become more self-sustaining. As Barry said, they started as 3 Africans. I'm sure now it's the other way around. You'll find they are more within themselves Africans than the rest. How then can we then, the second thing is, those innovators with very good ideas. I gave you an example of the innovation with the parking. How can they be linked to the corporate world? So the corporate, the startup corporate linkage came in, how can we then enhance that? Then we said we have these innovations in the university. So can you have an industry academia platform? And in that platform, you also said already universities are doing it in their various small ways. Can we have a national platform to be able to support that? And then within the framework of KIEP also we said we have SMEs now, those who are graduating or who are already beyond, or even the startups themselves, they need to graduate. How do we help them graduate and upscale them? But then that is how the SME linkages and upgrading program came in. And I'm excited that Diana is here with us today. Yes, thank you. Who is helping us within that particular subcomponent. One, we want it to be demand driven. A lot of times what we have been doing is, people need training. Peleka hao kwa class, train all of them on marketing. But maybe this startup is already good in marketing. Maybe what it needs is something different. How do I approach some soft skills of how do I approach a potential client who is a corporate? And a corporate, you know, you are talking of the Chandarias here, would look at you, young man, what do you need to offer? Yeah. So you need a platform to be able to get that opportunity, so that through that opportunity, you can showcase your talent. That is what now KIEP was designed to try and address. And beyond that, because we had our baby ASSEK, we deliberately, as part of the funding program from the World Bank, intended to support ASSEK to be able then to grow, because as we come up with the policy, remember we started when even this startup bill was not there. The next issue was how then do we come up with a policy? Yeah. Now they're running a bit of parallel. I mean, we are a bit slow in terms, but those are some of the outputs. And the people we were hoping to help us drive that was ASSEK. So that's how then that ecosystem has, is being looked at through KIEP. And we are hoping that we are now just trying to, because you see already you have moved so fast as ASSEK, you're already up and standing. How then can we then just change a bit of the desired outputs from the project, given that the ecosystem is also now growing? Yeah, so that we can then see at what level as we are growing. Initially we started when even the issue of startup bill was not there. There was even no policy structure. Yeah, but now we already have those thoughts. So that's the restructuring we are trying to work on. But ideally then, that was the intent of KIEP. That is what we still intend to do, but now with a slight more focus based on what is already happening. Of course, COVID also came. I know when we are looking at iHub, or rather the innovation hubs, the Lake Hub people, like, people are like working. It's like, you know, you come and gather. It's not the way we are used to, as I go to NSSF, my office daily. But now, interestingly, and I'm hearing it's already happening in developed countries like the US, we're already thinking of having non-physical office-less operations. Working home started as thanks to COVID. We have now seen the experience. Virtually, like a lot of us are watching us today, has come up also. So the future now would be different. Yeah, would not be like always I go to the office and because that space is actually rented. You know, we are improving on efficiencies. We are improving on competitiveness. We are reducing our costs. So things will change, and that is part of the reform process, and that is what KIEP we hope to be able to achieve.
How can we now as an ecosystem tap into that? Because one of the things about KIEP, we understood there's 50 million, not shillings, dollars, to be able to drive this vision. And I think all of us seated here, one way or the other, would like to understand how do we plug in? How, you know, there is a reset or trying to restructure it a little bit in light of all the developments that have happened from when it was initially designed. But where does that leave us? What timeline are we talking about? What should we be looking out for? New calls, for applications, for programs, drivers? Where are we?
Thank you. Indeed, we are, okay, it's a difficult question, but I'll answer it. Difficult in the sense that we have various partners, in this program. We have ourselves as government. We have the World Bank, who are, I would say, the other critical partner, given that they're giving us the funding. And then we have you, ecosystem players, as very critical partners in the whole arrangement. We have actually recruited management consultants to help us midwife this process, because as government probably would need somebody already in the system, would need Mary, who is already working within the system, to be able to help understand or fast track, getting to understand what the ecosystem needs as opposed to our traditional ways. So we have all those partners already, and some already have contracted. So what we are planning to do, we have more or less put ourselves together to agree on, okay, these are the more or less the 10 points we'd want to address. First, you know, they say charity starts from home. Once we have agreed on that 10 point, the next stage then is to share this with now the implementers, the management consultants, but also share this with yourselves as ecosystem players. So we just recently, it's more or less like 2 weeks ago, that we agreed on areas and how we can do it with the World Bank. We now need to take it to our next level of discussion. Remember, as a ministry, each and every other loan that is signed as government is signed with the National Treasury. So we, the implementers, then would also need to engage with the Treasury and say, okay, in our implementation, this is what we have seen has changed because of COVID and a lot of changes on board. This is where we think we want to go. Once we have that agreement, the next level is now to get to yourselves. And we think that by probably January, we should have cleared that process, and we see how we can then probably engage directly with yourselves for the last inputs and see whether what we have as a draft is good, or because we are not going through an entire design stage. Originally, we'd start, it's now a common terminology, bottom up, but that we already did when we were doing the design. So it's now, how do we build and improve on it?
So we're not going to get Christmas good news, but we are told, your promises in January shall not be in January.
Happy New Year.
Okay, my coffee.
Thank you.
So, just, I know I'm way over time, yes? Oh, okay, so I'm going to be kicked out of here. Any quick questions, burning questions for any of our panelists? Anybody? Any questions online? Going once, twice, thrice? Then we are safe. Oops. They had. So I think, thank you so much. I think it's been really interesting to, even as I'm seated here, to be honest, I'm learning. Because, as I said, we are blessed in terms of just the, who is it who's somebody told us in the morning that the resource for Kenya is above the ground. It's not under, it's the people. And clearly we are blessed with the people. So thank you so much. Thank you for the work you've been doing. A lot of it tends to be unnoticed. We really want to change that. We want to transform that narrative. I'm excited that even those reforms during COVID, you saw at a bump the number of registrations. But I'm hoping that with the work that we are doing, we can be able to say before this conference and after this conference, what happened? And I think that gives us a challenge as the hubs, as the hub managers, as the entrepreneurs, to ask ourselves, how do we build synergy? If you are seated from where I sat, I think to me it sounds like a lot of people have crossed halfway. It's a matter of meeting them halfway. We have development partners, as you've heard, organizations like Algidias Foundation, the World Bank, plus our government, Ministry of Industrialization, Ministry of ESC, Ease of Doing Business, a lot of interesting things that are speaking and really relevant for us in the work we're doing in ecosystem building, coming together. So let's see how we can meet them halfway and build the synergy that needs to be there. So with those few remarks, I'm going to stop and hand over back to our able MC, who I'm sure will never give me a microphone again.